a learning technique that improves the ability and the skill that you learn. In New York University, an experiment was conducted on teachers, on mind coaches, on spiritual coaches, different coaches from different spheres, different lecturers, different teachers were invited, and they were given a short training that need to be implemented, that need to be conducted upon a group of students that was divided in 2 categories and 4 groups. This experiment was conducted in order to look and analyze at the brain capacity, at the movement of the brain cells, and how your brain is functioning and how your learning ability is responding to this particular technique, to this particular research that was to be implemented, that was to be conducted. The name of this research that was conducted was Learning Retrieval of Information Technique, retrieval principle. This retrieval principle was something like you have fed some information in your laptop and that file has got deleted, so there is a file that retrieves files. That particular file, the way that processes, that same processing happens in our brains also. So let's come to the 4 groups and the 2 divisions and the categories. The 2 categories was divided into high school students that were aged between 16 to 18 years of age group, and the other category was students between 40 to 50 years old who were preparing for some sort of examination, some sort of thing that was the learning process they were invited to, because they wanted to learn something. So it is about students. Students can be of any age, and the research was exactly to bring out the reality of how the brain responds to the learning technique and the learning principle of retrieval of information. So now how to retrieve the information. Within these 2 categories, there were 2 groups. In the high school group, in the high school category, the 2 groups were one of those who were told that this quiz that we are going to have, we are going to take the marks that how you're performing, and we are going to include those grades in your main examination. And the other group of the high school students were told that this is just a fun session and this grades will be for your personal information, so that you can judge your brain and you can know your brain, how it is going. It will not impact your examination. And the same thing was done to this 40 to 50 year old of group. They were said that how you perform, this will be sent to your office and your workplace, and everybody will come to know of your performance. And the other group was told that nobody will come to know this information, the grades of how you're performing, which will be limited to you. So no mental pressure. Okay. So how now the experiment was conducted? A machine was kept where the brain and how the brain is responding, the movement and how the activity is impacting the brain, that was being noted. The frequency was being noted, and the authority to analyze and look at that machine was given to the students, that look how your brain is responding. Now they were the first hour, they were taught some lesson on history or any chapter like Renaissance or social cultural development. A chapter was narrated, explained to them and taught to them, and they were strictly not allowed to take any notes. Like they couldn't take notes of the thing that they were studying. 2 hours of break were given to them. After a 2-hour tiffin break, they would come back and 5 questions would be put up to them, and each group students will be asked 5 questions. Now immediately 3 to 4 answers they would answer rightly. Maybe the 5th question they wouldn't answer properly, but at least 3 to 4 of the questions they got it right. They got the right answers. Now the next day, they were not allowed to write or take down or carry back any notes. This has to be kept in mind. Now the next day they got back again 5 questions from the same lessons were asked, and they took a lot of time, say 4 to 5 minutes to recall and answer. Some of them could answer 1 to 2 questions, some of them could reach up to 3 questions, but lot of time they consumed, and many of them were such who couldn't answer a single question. There were also those type of students in all the 4 groups. Now slowly, with the repetition of this practice in the first week, in the second week, they noted that the time they were consuming to retrieve the information they studied yesterday, and in the revision session, the revision classes, the kind of the response, the time they took to recall and retrieve that information was reduced. For instance, there was a question asked last week on a particular subject or what they were taught. A student took good 4 to 5 minutes to answer that particular question, to recall that information. On the second week, the same student recalled the information within few seconds, within 30 to 40 seconds. Now this was the rapidness of the improvement of how the brain was responding to the retrieval of information principle. So their learning ability was improving, and they could see in the machines also that how their frequency was going up, was going down, the way their brain was responding. The vital difference that was to be noted was gradually All the people, all the students in that 4 groups responded positively, but there was one vital difference, and that difference was people, the student, that group that had mental pressure, both on the 50 to 40 year age group bracket, and the age bracket of 16 to 18 year age bracket, high school students, who had mental pressure, the group which had mental pressure that they have to be answerable, their grades will be shown to everybody and it will impact their life, their growth was slow compared to the people, to that group, to the other group in both the categories who just did it for the sake of fun. It was a fun session. They just wanted to observe the brain. They just wanted to go through a learning process and improve their brain. They responded much better because they were not under the mental pressure. So 2 things were proven, and in the research paper also these were included, and the teachers were taught and further trained to not put mental pressure, because mental pressure is inversely proportional to the productivity and your performance, the way you perform, irrespective of which gender you belong to, what is your age group, what is your sphere, what is your educational background, how strong or how weak your brain is, how intelligent or how foolish a person is. It doesn't matter. Regardless of any of these things, mental pressure is one thing that will directly impact, which will directly influence the productivity and the further outcome. And this learning, that retrieval of information principle that was applied to increase the learning ability, was a success. And it was proved, it got proven that whenever a human mind tries to recall information and repeats this process day after the other, consistently goes on repeating the process of retrieving information and not taking down notes, just retrieving the information, then it enhances the brain cells and it improves the learning cognition ability. So we need to conduct it in our day-to-day life. If you want to learn anything, if you want to increase our learning power, don't think of what age you belong to or what is your current position or where you are currently. Learning has no age, learning has no boundary. Just improve your skill. Try to implement this technique in your day-to-day life. And one thing I will personally recommend, they suggested do not take notes. I do not believe personally in copy-pasting a technique that I have come to know. Because if I've read a technique, if I've gained that knowledge, I will use my mind, how my body, mind and soul is responding. When I train a particular spiritual seeker or a sadhak or a student, when I am in contact with that person, I do not implement the same technique that I have applied on that person on the same student. If there are 2 techniques that I am implementing on both the students, I will make variations and changes studying and depending on how that student, how that person is responding. That is my main thing that when I do, because I completely believe in this thing that every individual has different individuality and that needs to be respected, that needs to be analyzed, that needs to be worked upon. If you feel you are taking notes and you can do well in your learning ability, take down that note. Because when I do it personally, I believe when I was a student, I used to take down the notes because that's how my body and mind responds. So not necessarily, it is what message are we getting from these techniques and the researches. From these research papers, what we get to know is that it is about do not mug up and do not have that mental pressure and do not mug up, do not just copy paste information in your mind without understanding, get an understanding of it and then you implement in your life so that you can improve your learning skill and learning ability. One thing I would surely like to point out, these new names, and these names are very fascinating when they say that retrieval of information principle or learning retrieval philosophy or principle. These are very fascinating. Law of attraction, manifestation. New names will emerge 10 years down the line. Very fascinating. Look at our ancient scriptures. Our different dharam gurus, our religious leaders, our religious seekers, our spiritual seekers and our ancestors of various religions, of various spiritual fields. Look at them. What did our Ved Shastra say? When there was an imparting of Ved Shastra between a guru and a shishya, that is a teacher and a student, it was always imparted on a verbal basis. Verbal gyan, that is verbal wisdom, was imparted and the student was expected in return to save and memorize it in the mind and keep the memory and the understanding of it in the mind. And then there were no notes back then, thousands of years ago. But today when we say that look at the ancient scriptures and the spirituals, it's called old school of thought. So new school of thought is always welcome, and old school of thought is looked at, okay, this was years ago, times are changing, new things are coming up. There is science, and as long as there is science, its basic job is to go on experimenting, go on discovering new things. But the base, according to my knowledge, according to my experience of life, according to my thought process and the school of thought that I believe in, it's all about pragmatism and ancient scriptures. It is about the synergy effect. I am a person, I belong to that old school thought, and I respect old school thought, because at the end of the day, it is the supreme consciousness, and when he brought this existence into power, he has empowered us, and he has not left us empty-handed, that it's science after thousands of years they will discover and then we will get an opportunity to improve ourselves. No, I strictly disbelieve that. What I believe in is a synergy effect of ancient knowledge and pragmatism. That is what we need to apply in our day-to-day life. That 41 days of life-changing course, life-changing experience, no dependency, what the slavery bred.